Some of these are really more written for my language and not for your language, so I know what I'm talking about. So first off, I want to say the difference between practicing versus watching. So what does that mean? I will start and say that as a brand new teacher, please practice in your body. It is so valuable to learn it and feel it and move with it while you're saying the words. You might notice that it's also really hard and you're chasing after your breath. That's very, very common because, right, we're trying to create a pace while we're teaching for our student, but to talk all the cues and do the breath, it's a lot. So there is a balance of finding the places where practicing is really important and the moments where you can maybe sit down on your block or on your mat and watch your student. Building the confidence to balance between those two is going to take time. So don't take it personally what I'm saying right now that like just because you practiced your first time teaching that it was bad. This is like a growth point. We want to get into the habit of actually practicing and demonstrating while also watching our students. Our students are the most important person in the room, and their body tells us a story. And from their story of their body, we develop our cues. We develop what it is that we need to say in order to assist them. What does that really mean? Well, if I'm just blabbling cues and saying random things that are completely irrelevant to that person's body, are they going to feel supported? Are they going to grow in their practice? Are they actually going to correct and start to make the adjustments that will benefit them? No, right? So looking at your student is necessary. That being said, what we learn here is foundational cues. It is the baseline of where you want to grow from with what it is that you're talking about. So, most importantly, understand the mechanics of the postures. Most importantly, understand the kind of injury prevention of the postures, right? And those cues are going to be like absolutely necessary no matter what, right? And as we learn to watch people's bodies, we start to say the right cues. We start to really tune in to that individual attention, and we can actually start to support people into a more embodied practice. Um, Another thing about demoing when we're practicing. So basically, you practicing is you demonstrating the practice. Okay. So there's always these funny moments where like you're half demonstrating a posture and then you kind of like don't fully complete it. And then your student completely copies what you're doing. It's important to note that, right? So if you are going to practice the entire posture the all the way through. And then say something like stay here or hold or whatever it is so that they know what they need to do and they're not going to be like a little monkey mimicking you. One of the difficulties if you're practicing the entire time, the minute you like take a break to grab your water, your student's going to take a great break and reach for their water, right? So they're already trained to mimic you if you are going to practice everything. So you have to be really attuned to what your body is doing and how you're presenting things. Kind of half-assing the anatomical alignment of a pose doesn't serve your student as well. So it's kind of this thing of like fully commit or like don't commit. So if you're not going to fully commit, sit down, sit on your shins, right? Like root so that they know that they're not here to copy your exact posture. Does that make sense?
I mean, I don't know if because it's kind of not what you're saying, but what I did feel worked for me was for vinyasa, since it came back like quite regularly. When she goes in down dog, then and there's 3 breaths there, I just kind of sit and start talking, have a moment to talk about other stuff because she's not looking at me anyway, but she'll take her 3 breaths.
Mm-hmm.
And that hence maybe the vinyasa was not complete, but I felt that felt nice.
Yeah, that's a great segue into like practice and watch. It also well, yeah, we'll talk about that now, and we might find myself repeating me, but whatever. Um, yeah, there are designed moments in the practice for your student to hold poses, to also put them in child's pose or do whatever, right? So we'll take the example of like child's pose and down dog. When you need to like go check your notes, or you find that you need to like stop moving because it's hard for you to keep talking, like resting positions for your students, such as like fine child's pose, or in your sun salutations, when we land in down dog for 5 breaths, it's a great place for you to rest, right? You to sit down, you to talk. In addition, I think what I'm hearing as well is like, where do we also have the spaciousness to make our cues not so fundamental, but our cues more interesting or dynamic? I guess I also like to use the term thematic or flowery, right? Where we get to weave in what we are wanting to bestow on our students. That can be words of empowerment. That could be weaving in the elements and feeling grounded. That can be time and space to talk about, listen to your heart, like whatever those kinds of cues are. There's so much opportunity in the sequence to kind of bring that in. And another thing to note is like, while we're on that conversation of like more flowery or thematic language, is recognizing how long it takes to say that stuff. So sometimes when we want to be really thematic in our dialogue or in our cues, and we say it on the right side, and we're talking all about being in tree and feel your roots and, all of that. And we're just going on in the symbology of tree. And then when we do it on the left side, we're like, great, root. Okay, now change, right? So it starts, there needs to be attention to how are we more mindfully providing space for the fundamentals of the posture, the demoing of the posture, like watching our students' body to give us the feedback of what it is that we need to say to them. And then also bringing in, we can call it the special sauce, right? That special sauce is the thematics, is the chakras, is the elements, right? We want to sprinkle that throughout the whole practice. We don't want to like dump in all the sugar in one spot and like, not have balance throughout that kind of expression. Did that kind of?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was very much
Okay. You might find me repeating myself because they all weave together, but that's fine. Okay. So feeling good on practice versus watching. So the second one that I want to talk about is helicopter versus sitting. Well, what the fuck is a helicopter? What does a helicopter do? Okay, imagine my computer is a person and I'm like, interesting. Right? I'm helicoptering around my person. When we're in our art of teaching classes and we look at our beautiful Monet masterpiece, that's totally fine to be a helicopter, right? We're intentionally learning from that person's body. We're really trying to look at every single angle so that we can get in as much as information as possible so that we can learn what we're looking for. How does it feel to be the masterpiece, the Monet art piece on the wall, and your teacher just staring at every little nook and cranny of your body to be like, move your right foot, bend that knee, maybe, whatever. It's awkward, is it not? Right? It's like a hyper magnifying glass. It doesn't feel good for the individual. So the helicopter is very much this kind of overbearing energy of the teacher, where imagine like, well, as a one-on-one, right? It's so nitpicky. It has a very nitpicky feeling and kind of like examining my body like I'm on a like doctor's table and you're like, that doesn't look right. You shouldn't be doing that. It's like it doesn't give me the freedom to embody myself or be in my experience. I feel maybe if it was me, I would feel like I'm doing something wrong or that, like I'm really something to fix. It's not a empowering energy. Has anyone experienced that or do you know what I'm talking about here? Yeah. So As we start to get comfortable as a teacher, watching our helicopter tendency is really, really important because we want to be like, I want to help, I want to quote fix. We're not fixing anyone. The biggest part of the journey is their own self discovery and their own self awareness. So, really, as a teacher, we're empowering them to learn their body, not tell them their body is out of alignment or wrong or needs to be fixed. The helicopter energy promotes that like "Rah" feeling, right? So, as the opposite to helicoptering, I just say, sit down. And that grounded energy in your body helps to promote that sense of like rooting, that sense of like, oh, like I'm in my container, you're in your container, and I am just like spacious, but like hovering over you feels really invasive. So be attuned to kind of that dynamic. It's really, really common as a beginner teacher to helicopter. And we want to get in this place of like, you are you. You are an autonomous and empowered person. And I have tools to help you, but nothing's wrong with you. Even if your quote chaturanga is out of alignment, I can tell you like one or two things that might support you, but I'm not coming in there to be like, no, it's still wrong. Right. If you want to take my wisdom, great. If you don't, that's on you. That's okay. Right. So it's important to really remember that as the essence of helicoptering and sitting.
I guess, I don't know if it happens, but you might get a one-on-one client who specifically comes to you to say, like, I really want to be adjusted.
Absolutely.
And then it's more thing of like, okay, each pose is really long and slow, but we're getting all the micro.
So there's a difference of like workshopping something and then examining you the entire practice and nitpicking your body or your form or alignment in that regard. I think one-on-one is really powerful because you do get that opportunity to make those micro adjustments and really teach someone how to best support them for their body. What's important for that section that I just said, their body, right? They might not be ready for a full chaturanga. So instead of trying to tell them this is how chaturanga should be, and because their body's not ready, right? Their butt's probably up in the sky, they probably can't go as far down and you're like, well, you need to go lower, you need it to be like this, you're kind of forcing someone into something that's just not going to work, right? So, some of that like support of a teacher is really actually like meeting your student where they're at, accepting their body exactly as it is, finding ways that are going to prevent injury, and then giving them little nuggets along the way. My best example is that like I had a student who, was like coming to class like for like a year. And I would say the same cues and down dog every single day, every day, every freaking day. And I would give him adjustments. And I also realized like his body wasn't ready for those adjustments and his body wasn't ready to take those cues. And then one day comes up to me and was like, oh my God, why did you never tell me to do that? And I was like, I mean, I have, but I'm so glad today was the day that it clicked. So, as a teacher, it's really important to remember someone's going to receive your teachings when it's time. Going back to kind of that idea of like one on one and workshopping, like find one thing in that practice to hone in on because people can only learn so much at a time and people can only like make so much change at once. So even though you are empowered with all of this knowledge, all of this wisdom, you're like, well, I know how to help your chaturanga, and I know how to help your warrior one, and I know how to help your warrior three, and I know how to help your pigeon, and I know how to help you with this, and then. That person's going to feel so overwhelmed in that practice, right? And it also loses their power to discover and feel their body. So pick one thing to really facilitate or workshop or fix, right? And I don't like the word fix, but assist instead of like, let me fix absolutely everything because absolutely everything's wrong, right? So there's that kind of benefit. And then I want to move on to mat placement. So some of you guys chose tinier spaces. So this might not be completely relevant for your exact situation, but your mat placement is really important. I saw a lot of mats like literally nose to nose, and you guys could have kissed each other on your up dog. And it was so cute. And I was like, oh, like I love how close and connected and comfortable you feel. Are you going to do that with someone you don't know? No, it's going to feel super weird. Another thing about like the teacher student space between your mats is giving someone the space to be in their body, the space to be on their mat. And like, I don't want to be like mat to mat sardines next to my teacher. Like, whoo, I want to move. I want to breathe. So be mindful of your mat placement. Like even, we call it like a T essentially, right? Like instead of nose to the middle of the mat, like put some space between it, right? Because warrior 3, you're going to have to like get off your mats and move to other sides and like, you're adjusting. So when you're placing your mat, you really got to think about the practice, right? Warrior 3, well, they're going to be reaching. Are they going to be reaching and we're going to be holding hands and it's going to be super fun and cute? Maybe, but mostly give your mat some space. Another thing around mat placement is you need to always have your student in eyesight, and your student always needs to see you. So let's say the mats are parallel and you both are in warrior 2. Well, someone's back is facing someone's face. And if your back is facing the teacher, you're losing out on all of that information that you can learn from your student in that regard. So as the teacher, your feet are not glued to the mat, nor are you glued to the mat. Move around the room. If you notice when I teach, my mat's up there, but when you guys are all in warrior 2 with your right foot forward, I'm standing over there. When you're in warrior 2 with your left foot forward, I'm standing over here so that you can always see me and I can always see you. Critical. Sure, you can demonstrate every now and then with your back facing someone. I sometimes like to have my back facing for like tree pose so that everyone's on the same size, or for dancer's pose so everyone's really not mirroring, everyone's just copying me. And that's an effective tool to have. But I'm not going to stay with my back facing the class. Yeah. And then reading your notes versus reading your student. I've emphasized a lot around reading your student. It's totally okay to read your notes, please. But when are you doing it? Be mindful of that, right? So reading your notes, maybe when they're in down dog and they're not looking at you. Great. It's a great moment to quickly read what's coming next, get it prepared, and then like move on. Say you're lost and you're like, shit, I have no idea. Well, if your person's like standing in Tadasana and you're like, hey, hold on, and you like grab your piece of paper, like it doesn't feel good. It feels unprepared, So put them in Tadasana, have them close their eyes, feel the earth. Okay, well, their eyes are closed. Now they have no idea I'm secretly reading my notes. Put them in child's pose. Their eyes are towards the ground or their eyes are wherever, like towards the earth, right? Great opportunity to sneak your notes. It's really important to understand how your behavior on the mat impacts the relationship of teacher-student in the room. Teach versus tell. So telling someone to feel grounded is interesting because not everyone is going to feel grounded. Child's pose, for example, right? We call this often like our place of rest. Well, I know a lot of people that don't feel comfortable in child's pose. It hurts their knees. Their hips are tight. Folding forward at that deep of a level also doesn't feel good. So when you're like, let's like find child's pose and soften, that person's going to be like, I can't soften, right? Teaching is saying maybe a bolster underneath your hips, but like between your like calves can soften the pressure in your knees. Teaching is maybe double up your mat so that the bony part of your knees doesn't feel so bony. I don't know, whatever the word is. Or you can say if child's pose doesn't work for you, come to a comfortable seat, however that looks for you. Do you notice how different that is than imposing a sensation on someone? Another example is I don't know, warrior 1, or we can say warrior 2 because people feel better in warrior 2. Feel powerful, right? Not everybody's going to feel powerful there. Teach them how to feel powerful. Feel powerful by grounding into your feet, pushing down. Feel powerful by sending energy out through your arms, and notice the chest, the heart energy radiate. See if you can find that sense of rooting into your core, coming inward to your inner strength. Way different than just saying feel powerful. So teach someone how to embody, maybe it's a word or a sensation, as opposed to imposing a sensation on them. Theme weaving, huge. Having a theme for your class is absolutely beautiful. Your theme can also be anatomical. It can be something like a hip opening class. Cool. You might not love talking about the chakras or astral projecting or, elemental wisdom. Awesome. You don't need to in order to make your class thematic. Thematic can come with directing focus to different parts of your body and so on. Theme weaving is also weaving it lightly throughout the class. So that also means sprinkling the sugar, the special sauce everywhere. Don't just dump it at the beginning and dump it at the end. Takes time, but it also means knowing how to more concisely emphasize the theme. Weave in the word grounding more regularly, or rooting, or synonyms for the word or the experience that you're trying to evoke. The theme helps us connect more to the energetic body as well as the spirit body. So we'll learn that in a little bit more about the koshas and stuff like that, but it's about kind of taking this into both a mind, body, and spirit practice, and theme weaving helps do that. Punctuality and preparedness. So setting the space, being ready, being grounded when you are arriving so that your student can walk into that same energy. A lot of you guys did a really beautiful job setting up the space and being very intentional with having an altar and things like that. You don't need an altar to make something sacred. It has a lot to do with how you choose to show up. That also means honoring the practice. Really honoring how this work is powerful and important for the person who's showing up. So even just maybe you are already there and sitting and rooted, and that person matches your energy, versus kind of feeling like, oh, let me drop my bag and you're still fiddling. Thank you. Fiddling. You're still fiddling around. So just remember that preparedness is also not just the space, but it's you. Preparedness also means, have you studied? Have you felt your sequence? Have you spent time with what you're doing? It shows. It really, really shows. And that comes with the inner confidence. It doesn't mean that you need to memorize every single sequence, every single pose, but there is a sense of inner support that radiates out from you. Props and modifications. I love props. You should too. I also love modifications. You should too. It's hard to be a brand new teacher and weave that in, but the more we practice, the better we get at it. It also means that understanding that every body is going to express the posture different. So having our tools such as props and bolsters and blocks and straps for all of the poses and ways, and remembering to cue it, weave it in. You see someone not being able to touch their toes. Great. This is why it's so important to watch your student. Bring them a block. You see them struggling with tension. Awesome. Bring them a block, right? That's that part of building teacher-student trust and building the teacher-student relationship, right? Is your level of presence and awareness of how their body is manifesting so that you can give them the tools that they need to find steadiness and ease. Thank you, Patanjali, right? Modifications are a lifelong journey as well to figure out how to best help someone. I love Pinterest, I love books, I love Google for figuring out various modifications. I would say study, 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 study. It is going to serve you. Modifications doesn't always mean that someone is unable to touch their toes and needs to bend their knees. Someone who is also flexible can really benefit from various modifications because we have amplifications and we have modifications. And someone at some point is always going to need the support for that. So, yeah, I would say even the more advanced I am in my practice, the more I use my props. Okay, timing. An amplification would be like, for example, if someone's in a seated forward fold and like their entire arm is going far past their toes, putting like a block in front of the soles of the feet and holding the block would be an amplification of using the prop. That block can actually assist them in feeling more support and realigning like their inner thigh or their legs for better depth. That would be like a way to support. Straps are also a great way. Like even if you, I think we did it in class that one day, we did like the side stretch, this, right? A lot of people who have the flexibility collapse a lot in that posture. And so giving them a prop to actually reset them into alignment in more of like a lateral bend, that strap can keep them and kind of stretch them in a new way. So that kind of amplification modification can support those that are super bendy and those that want to become more bendy. All right, timing. So in timing, that, yeah, oh yeah.
Would you like demonstrate the pose without and with the instructor?
Totally. That's a great way to do it, right? You can all, I love demonstrating at the beginning. This is a great place to start. Show what that looks like. Props can help you bring the ground to you. Like I like to start and meet everyone at the lowest common denominator in the room, essentially, because it makes it feel really inclusive. And then I will grow the pose. But say, for example, I started like, here's side angle with the bind. If you can't do that, put your hand on a block. It doesn't sound very nice and it doesn't feel nice. So always starting like, let's start with the block. The block at the highest height is best for most everybody. If you find that you have space, maybe shorten the block or remove the block. If you find that you want to go further, so on and so on, try the bind, try this, try that. So yeah, I always start at the lowest common denominator. Okay, timing. So keeping track of timing on both sides is a skill. It is tricky, it is hard, but it is very, very important. One of the best tools I can say for that is being attuned to how many cues you are saying. So for example, I say between 3 to 5 cues on one side. So like I'll start with the right and I'll really do the foundational cues. People learn and people remember. Then on the left side, I might repeat kind of some of those, but I'm really going to say maybe 3 new cues or 1 more new cue. But if I'm giving away all of my cues on the right side, and then I'm giving just 2 cues on the left side, it's not going to feel great. You're also going to spend way too much time on the right and not enough time on the left. So we have a lot of cues for all of these poses. Get comfortable with 3 to 5 on the right side and another 3 to 5 on the left side. That will help you keep each side feeling more balanced. And then in total, some of you guys were reflecting on, I was going too fast, so I slowed down, and then I was going way too slow, and then I had to speed up, and then I missed some things, right? So timing around the whole thing is really important. Finding that consistency in your words and your pacing in your breath is going to come with practice. but it is nice to notice, especially in reflection, what section did I go through too quickly and why? What parts can I slow down in? We're going to learn more about sequencing, but part of our sequence is designed in or most of our sequences are designed in a bell curve where we kind of climb the mountain, we generate heat, such as our sun salutations. We want to build energy. We're kind of moving a little bit more actively. And then as we find our way off the mountain, we start to cool down. We do our pigeon pose, our seated sequence, our supine twists. Well, am I going to talk really, really slowly on the climb up? No, not necessarily. I can be intentional, but I also want to let my pacing reflect the energy of the practice. So when I get down into the hips, when I get down onto the earth, when I'm doing the supine sequence, my voice is going to be a lot slower. It's going to start to match the energy or the medicine of the postures. I'm not going to be talking super, super fast and trying to hype up my students in like pigeon. No, I'm trying to take them on an inward journey, a deep journey. So your voice also helps to carry the timing and the energy of the practice. That kind of is going to jump us down to voice, pace, tone, and cadence, right? Your tone is important to fluctuate throughout the practice. Having a really loud voice and like screaming at someone in meditation isn't pleasant, right? Also, your tone when you're helping someone activate into a more challenging posture is uplifting, is it not? You're like, come on, we can do it. Let's try. And then your tone when you're taking someone into pigeon or forward fold. Well, that energy is more soothing, more grounding, more gentle, right? So we want our tone to match the medicine of the postures, as well as our tone and cadence to match the journey of the class. Cueing the breath and breath timing. So inhale for 5. Okay, now exhale for 5. Did you have time to inhale for 5? No, not at all. So cueing the breath and our timing of our breath is really important. It's hard. The best thing that I found to help me maintain that the breath has the time is to count it out loud. Okay, let's inhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, pause. Good. Exhale 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, pause. Counting is great for your student. They also get to regulate with ease, and then you get to stay on track. Saying, stay here for 3 breaths, and then telling them immediately what pose is coming next also is not a great way of timing and cueing the breath. So if you're going to tell someone to stay here for 3 breaths, cue those 3 breaths. It's really helpful for you and your student. Speaking of breaths, in our sun salutation, so sun A, that first down dog, we generally hold it for 3 to 5 breaths, not just to make your life miserable and hard, but to actually give you time to regulate your breath, to ground, to slow down, to regain control of your movements and of your body. Mountain pose, we begin and end in the same place. Transitions are really important. Honor your transitions. What does that mean? Give someone a moment to feel just what happened. Pause. Now let's do our next one. Okay. So spaciousness can be really valuable in your sun salutations. You might notice that as you were teaching and you were running out of your breath, that is a great sign for you to invite more pause into the practice, not just for you to get your breath and your words, but for your student. That also probably means you're talking way too fast. They're having a really hard time keeping up. When your breath is spacious, right, the class feels spacious. That goes along with kind of cueing of the breath, regulating your own breath as well. Okay, now a little bit more into verbiage. Drop, grab, hang. These aren't the most soft, empowering, or exciting words. So place your foot to the mat, return your foot to the mat, lightly land your foot to the mat, right? These are going to help us also give our student more control over their body, right? Drop your foot to the mat, bum, right? So just being mindful of those kinds of words. And then now we're gonna. We hear this a lot with new teachers. Now we're gonna do this. Now we're gonna fold forward. Now we're gonna lift the chest. So now we're gonnas are fine. We all say them, we all do them. It's really more of like, how many now we're gonnas are you gonna say? Your breath is designed to take you from pose to pose. Transition words are your breath. Inhale, lift your chest is really all you have to say. The breath is the direction and is the guide. Okay. Now we're gonnas. Next is this and that, right? These we call fluff words or, filler words. We want to start to learn how to remove them from our vocabulary. And then section titles. Our class is supposed to carry someone on a journey. We don't need to say, here is our standing balance sequence. Here is our seated sequence. Here is our supine sequence, right? The sections are for you to learn how to sequence. Your student has no idea what that means unless they're a yoga teacher, and then your yoga teacher is like, yeah, and, right? So weave it together. The breath is what connects it all. You do not need to say the sections of the poses, sections of the sequences. Last but not least is adjustments. First off, I want to say I am very proud of a lot of you who took that opportunity to get off your mat and adjust your student. Really, that takes a lot of courage. It takes, a lot of understanding of the practice. And yeah, adjustments are a lifelong journey. Adjustments should always be the last thing you do. They are not the first thing we do in order to help our student. It is always, always, always the last. Your words should be the most powerful and influential aspect of your teachings. Then your demonstration. We have visual learners, audio learners, right? Demonstrate. People do a really great job mimicking you. We are monkeys. We love to mimic each other. Let them mimic you. Demonstrate it. Show them so they can feel it. Demoing and your words gives your student autonomy and power. It also shows that there is kind of not this fixing or forcing or wrongness in their body. Adjusting hands-on is a very delicate thing, and we have very, very, very rarely gone over it. So there's a lot around how we touch, when we touch, where we touch, and why we touch. We have not gone over adjustments. So it's awesome that you gave it a go. Proud of you. It's incredible. There's so much to learn on to how to do this with more precision and more grace as well. We will have a whole day of going over adjustments. Another thing around adjustments, as we're talking about it, it is not about manipulating someone's body. It's about supporting someone's body. So there's a big difference in how we go about adjusting and telling or trying to touch someone into, you need to do this, versus it might feel better if. All right. I think I moved through it. We are also over time, but we needed to do this. And so I'm sure your bellies are hungry. Any questions around what is on the board or things that might not have been addressed that got talked about in your reflections?
I feel like I'm overwhelmed when I know to kind of not do both, I know all of them do, and I'm told that we're all like, so when I have somebody who doesn't know that, I'm totally welcome to so they don't feel like they have to do.
Yeah, totally. It's a great question. Yeah, teaching beginners is the hardest thing. Absolutely the hardest. Teaching your buddy who's in a yoga teacher training, probably the easiest, right? But the biggest thing to do is start at the bottom and move upward. Start with injury prevention and start with the foundation of the posture. If they follow along, cool, great. If they don't, respect their no. And I think that's a really important element of someone's body, because that kind of goes back to my story of like the guy after a year, he was like, well, why didn't you tell me? And I was like, no, I've told you. You just weren't ready. So there's that difference of coming in and noticing when someone actually can respond and do what you're like nudging them towards, instead of like manipulating and moving and they're not ready. So even if someone's quote doing the pose wrong, it's kind of okay, because it's really up to them to make the changes. One-on-ones, workshopy style things, yeah, like get in there and be like, okay, cool, let's see if we can kind of adjust and support, and we'll get more tools with that when we do our big like adjustment kind of training. But in there, I think is so much this delicacy and softness with how we're actually just offering someone ease. And the first question is always, how does this feel for you? Do you notice tension? Ask them questions because most people don't have the tools for inquiry. So ask them the inquiry questions. Does this feel comfortable? Do you feel tension? Is there pain and strain in your knee? Would it feel better to do this? All of those are questions before I've touched them. So again, it goes back to your words are the most important part.
I'll just say, if there are particular postures that you want to know how to reverse engineer them for someone, just write them down and then let us know. And
Yeah.
we'll include them later in the training.
And I think the reverse engineering is a lot around modifications and helping us kind of build our repertoire and our toolbox of modifications will be really helpful. Sam.
Great things, or I'm wondering, in our first couple classes that we're gonna teach, what are like some things with both your experiences would be the things you would want us to like really focus on, or themes or things on this board or in your experience to come out and show them that on our first couple times?
Less is more. Less is more. That goes with your cueing, that goes with your sequencing, and that goes with your adjustments.
Yeah, don't try to do it all. Maybe pick. I would say just pick a couple, which you kind of already did. Like in your reflections, you were really self-aware. You're like, this is what really went well for me, and this is what a place that I want to grow in. And start there.
Yeah.
Every one of us, like all of you took like so many steps forward, and they're all individual to you and like where you're at, what came naturally, what didn't come naturally. So it's hard for us to say like focus on these as a general note. These are like your roadmap basically for your own personal reflection. Like, okay, this one's really relevant for me. This one I kind of totally got. This is super clear. This is not super clear. And know that like we also are continuously revisiting all of these points to refine our own level of practice and instruction.
And on that note is like, pick one thing or like two things, because then you master it. Like you master one thing best, you're really fucking good at it, and then you can take on the next thing. But when you're trying to master everything, you're going to feel kind of incompetent and it's not going to have as much depth. Less is more. Find that one thing, push forward, master, build confidence, then find the next thing. Yeah. Yeah.
At some point, will we get some personal feedback, like at the end or something? Will we get any individual feedback from you guys?